Good morning.
Down in front.
It was a productive but somber bipartisan member briefing this morning, followed by the Democratic caucus meeting, all of us grappling with the horrific terrorist violence unleashed on the Israeli people. Every hour we're learning more details of the atrocities perpetrated by the Hamas terrorists. We mourn the loss of life, including the many American citizens who have been killed. May the memories of all the innocent victims be a blessing. I'm pleased this morning to be joined by the House Foreign Affairs Ranking Member Gregory Meeks and the Vice Ranking Member of Foreign Affairs Kathy Manning. Our caucus is committed to the safety, security, and prosperity of the State of Israel. This week, we hope our Republican colleagues will put an end to the self-inflicted chaos so that we can begin to govern on behalf of the American people, which includes congressional action to support Israel in their time of need. Leader Hakeem Jeffries has offered an enlightened vision for a bipartisan governing coalition to pull the House back from the brink. We can pass meaningful legislation that meets the needs of the American people by lowering costs, creating jobs, and building safer communities while fulfilling our responsibilities at helping our allies abroad and meeting the needs of our national security. That's what leaders do, and that's exactly why the House Democratic Caucus unanimously voted to nominate Hakeem Jeffries for Speaker of the House yesterday. Now I'd like to introduce Vice Chair Ted Lieu.
Thank you, Chairman Aguilar. I strongly condemn the brutal invasion by Hamas of Israel and the barbaric acts committed against Israelis, American citizens, and citizens of other nations. There are no words strong enough in the English language to describe the unspeakable evil perpetrated by Hamas. Last Saturday was the deadliest day for the Jewish people since the end of the Holocaust. Let me now just state the obvious. Hamas is not interested in peace. Hamas is a genocidal, homicidal, religiously fanatical terrorist organization. It has two goals: to slaughter Jews and to annihilate the State of Israel. Its founding charter tells its members to kill Jews and to destroy Israel. Hamas beheads babies, murders the elderly, and wipes out entire families. The world has seen the menu of evil that Hamas uses to inflict maximum terror and maximum suffering. There can be no path towards peace until Hamas is dismantled. Israel not only has a right to defend itself, Israel has a right to make sure these atrocities never, ever happen again. The American people have stood with Israel and will continue to stand with Israel for as long as it takes to dismantle and destroy Hamas. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce one of the smartest people I know in foreign affairs, the ranking member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Greg Meeks.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, Mr. Chair. First, let me just say that after receiving the confirmation of the killing and beheading of children, toddlers, infants, it shows that when you talk about Hamas, they are really ISIS. The same kind of killing, horrendous, inhumane actions. This attack is truly unprecedented. When you consider the size of Israel's population, proportionally, it would be like 30,000 people dying in my home city of New York on 9/11. The dead are women, children, the elderly, Holocaust survivors, civilians, soldiers, and now confirmed babies were beheaded. Women were raped. People shot, stabbed, and blown up with grenades. One thing that every human being on this planet must acknowledge is that Hamas exists for one reason, and one reason only: to destroy Israel. You can't have peace in a region if someone's existence is to say that you can't exist. You should not exist. We were moving and continue to move, to use diplomacy, to try to get other states. This is why the Abraham Accords are so important, because for the first time you're getting other nations to say Israel has the right to exist, and we're going to figure out how to work together. That's never Hamas. I believe Hamas has seen this coming and know that their existence would be wiped out, and they caused this thinking that they can destroy Israel. That's not going to happen. Second, I want to acknowledge that there are innocent Palestinians in both Gaza and the West Bank that hope to just live normal and free lives. They want nothing to do with Hamas. Hamas is their enemy too, because what the cowardly people of Hamas does is use them as human shields to try to hide the weapons, the strategy, and the things that they are doing. So I just want to make sure that we cannot lose sight of this. And we must keep these Palestinian people and their safety and livelihoods in mind as we crush Hamas. And finally, one of my deepest concerns is that there's a chance that this war can expand beyond its current scope. And I know that our administration and our allies are working around the clock to send messages and warnings to Iran and Hezbollah to stay out. I hope also that until we know more, we are all cautious about how we speak about Iran's role in public. We don't want a widening conflict. We are living in a very dangerous time. We want to get the facts, and we want to act accordingly, staying by our true values. But there's one thing that I think is absolutely clear. It was clear in the classified session. It's clear in our Democratic caucus. We are going to stand by Israel and make sure that we defend and give them what they need to defend themselves till this is won. And the last thing, I just say this, because in the spirit of what Leader Jeffries has talked about, trying to governing in a bipartisan way, in that same spirit, I reached out and worked and talked to Chairman McCall, and we came out with a joint statement, and we worked out a joint resolution. The problem is the dysfunctioning on that side of the aisle, that we cannot do anything until they decide what they're going to do with reference to a speaker. But I think it's significant and important, and we're working collectively together to try to make sure that whenever that dysfunction ends and they can come up with a speaker, that one of the first things that can be voted on is a joint resolution from Congress saying that we stand with our friend, our ally, Israel. Now it's my pleasure to call up the vice-ranking member of our distinguished committee, Kathy Manning.
Thank you, Ranking Member Meeks. Thank you, my colleagues. I'm Kathy Manning. I'm the vice-ranking member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. This has been a shocking and horrifying time for our democratic ally Israel and for the American Jewish community. None of us could have imagined the horrific barbarism of the Hamas terrorists who invaded a sovereign nation, a democracy, and literally went door to door, slaughtering families in their homes, beheading babies, committing a massacre of young people at an outdoor concert, taking civilians hostage, babies, the elderly, all ages in between. Now they have stated that they will execute these hostages one by one on video and share these gruesome videos with the world. I want to thank President Biden for his strong statement yesterday and his unequivocal support of Israel. We in the U.S. Congress will do everything in our power to stand with Israel and make sure they have everything they need to win this war against the Hamas terrorists. And let me remind the press that this is not a time for false moral equivalencies. Hamas terrorists are just that. They are not militants. They are not freedom fighters. They are terrorists, just as ISIS fighters and Al-Qaeda fighters are terrorists. Hamas terrorizes and misuses its own people, the people it is supposed to govern in Gaza. And we have seen the true face of Hamas, their horrific acts toward everyday people, Israelis, Americans, and other nationalities last Saturday. I urge patience as Israel does what it must to dismantle the Hamas terrorist entity, to stop the aggressions of Hezbollah in Lebanon, and to protect the Israeli people. Israel will win this war, and the United States will stand by Israel's side in this fight for democracy and humanity. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Both the vice chair and I echo what the chair and the vice, what the ranking member and the vice ranking member, former chair, soon-to-be chair, Greg Meeks on these issues, and appreciate his leadership in the classified briefing. We can't talk about the contents of it, but I can tell you, our members asked incredibly thoughtful questions, and they were guided by ranking member Meeks throughout the briefing. Questions? Alan?
I take your point, how you started by saying that for Republicans, the lack of speaker is self-inflicted. Of course, Israel completely changes the dynamic here. Has it changed the conversations that you've been having with your members about the possibility of, if the Republican frenzy continues on for a while, is there a possibility of putting McHenry in an officialized pro tempore role just so that you can do the resolutions that you're talking about? Has it changed the calculus at all?
I think that there have been more conversations among colleagues across the aisle as a result of the events this weekend. But Leader Jeffries set the tone before October 7th. Leader Jeffries set the tone that we want a bipartisan path forward. He wrote the op-ed, how we have talked about this issue. But just a reminder, again, we're here, and this is Republican self-inflicted chaos, because Kevin McCarthy had to negotiate with the most extreme members of his conference, and he lowered the threshold for a motion to vacate. That started it, a leadership member, when we were in charge, offering it to 50 members, to 25 members, to 15 members, to 5, to a single member. That's why we're here. He negotiated this, he set this up, and he felt the consequences of that. As a result, we have to govern. What we spent our morning talking about was Israel and policy, friendship, alliance, strength, national security. That's what the Democratic caucus talked about this morning, in classified and in unclassified versions. What the Republican conference is talking about are rule changes and who's in charge. So a dramatic difference. It could not be more stark in the differences between the two parties. But I can tell you, we stand ready and willing to have a governing coalition, a bipartisan path forward. That's what we want. That's what we hope happens. It's going to take our Republican colleagues stepping up and deciding that they also want that path.
Can I just ask a quick follow-up, because you said that there's been increased conversation across the aisle. Can you talk about some of the outreach that you or your members have been getting from Republicans then?
We've just heard from members having healthy conversations about where we are, about the state.
Jeffries,
All I'll say is, at the non-leadership level, I think that members have been, having conversations, and they were having conversations before as well. We stand ready and willing to work with our colleagues to find a path, but they're going to have to, stand up to members in their conference and to say that that's what they want. I assume that that's not going to be easy for them, but we hope that they find a way. Yield to the Vice Chair.
I just want to reiterate what Chairman Aguilar said. While the Democrats today were talking about Israel and how we help the American people and our national security, the Republicans were talking about themselves.
If you'll indulge me with two. First is, you just spoke about unity within your conference. You had the resolution that you put forward has roughly 400, when I checked this morning, names. One, how important is it that you have unity within your caucus on that resolution, or are you okay with ones who do not sign on to it? And secondly, I'm going to change topics a little bit on you. There's been a resolution put forward by New York Republicans to expel George Santos from Congress on these new superseding indictments. Congress has only expelled 2 members in recent history, both after they were convicted. Obviously, an expulsion needs 2/3 to have happen, which means they would need votes from you. Are you willing to provide those?
I'll ask both the Vice Chair and Ranking Member Meeks to speak on both of these issues. One, because it's his resolution, but also as a member of the New York delegation. What I'll say to your first point, Leader Jeffries has said, and we've said this throughout the last 10 months, unity does not mean unanimity. The Democratic caucus can be unified behind our values, behind our purpose, behind the policy that we support. And that doesn't always mean we have unanimity. I expect if this resolution comes to a vote, which I hope it does soon, if Republicans set the chaos aside and we have someone to preside, I would assume it's going to have an extremely strong bipartisan vote that sends a message to one of our most important allies in Israel. That's the story. That's what we hope is discussed. And we will let our members make their own decisions. Second point, serial fraudster George Santos is only in Congress because House Republicans protected him in May. When resolutions came up, they voted to table it, and they have to live with that. And now I understand that some of them might want a redo, just like the former speaker might want a redo. That's not where we are. And so, we will see what the floor activity is on an expulsion resolution. Obviously, it has a high threshold, but we firmly believe, the House Democratic Caucus firmly believes, that individual, that George Santos, does not meet the standards of someone who should serve under this dome. We've been very clear about that. It's only our Republican colleagues who have protected him, namely because they need the vote. Anytime we see something, and George Santos has been the deciding vote on items of policy over the last few months, they need his vote. That's why they protect him. That's why he's still here. Yield to the Vice Chair and then Ranking Member Meeks.
The con man purportedly known as George Santos should resign. Multiple Democratic members of Congress and Republican members of Congress have called on him to resign. I believe if a motion to expel was put on the floor, it would pass. He can save himself that embarrassment by simply resigning.
The leader is exactly right as to the resolution. Everyone is considering it in the Democratic caucus, but members will make their own choice. We've now up to over 400 members that have signed on. Some are reading and looking and going through it, which is their right to do. But I can tell you one thing, that every member has said in every statement is the viciousness of Hamas and their actions. I don't think that there's not one member has not acknowledged the criminal acts and the inhumane actions of Hamas. Well, let the members read, as they do with every other piece of legislation, and make determinations on whether they sign on or not. That is their right. We're not going to get into the dysfunctions as the way that the Republicans are. As to George Santos and the motion to expel him, the vice chair's got it right. He should have been gone a long time ago. And if they were serious about it, those 4 New Yorkers, they would have insisted upon it and put it up before. Now, I hope, I don't know, we'll see what happens. They're not just playing politics with this, because they know that their seats are on the line. And I suggest to you, look at most of their votes. I would suggest to you that their votes are very similar to Mr. Santos's. They are enablers. And now trying to hide because they will be called to task about how strong they were and their positions. And I don't think New Yorkers are sleeping. They're watching. They're looking. They'll see the votes that Santos has taken and the votes that they have taken. They'll look at the dysfunctioning of the Republican caucus that they are all complicit in. They can run, but they can't hide from the dysfunction of the Republican Party preventing us from moving on. They should take the lead of Leader Jeffries, if they're serious, and say we need to function in a bipartisan way so that we can govern and do the best that we can as we do our jobs as members of the United States House of Representatives.
Question for you as an appropriator. The administration is signaling they want Ukraine aid and Israel aid to go together. There are others in the House Republican side of the aisle who are saying they don't want to do that. What is the path forward for that aid?
Well, the first step is for the administration to offer, to send it up here for ranking members and chairs to go through the document. But I would also say it's probably Israel and Ukraine, but also could include Taiwan. So there could be other assistance and aid that is in there. The administration also had $4 billion for migration-related supplemental that wasn't acted on in Congress. So that could also be included. I'm not going to presume what the administration sends us their needs are, and they also need to decide what timeline. Is this aid for a number of months, or is this through the end of the fiscal year? Those are things that we're going to need to work with them on. But when we have those documents and that clarity, I think you can expect our ranking members and our members to comment and to help the administration. The bottom line is, we feel that aid to Israel will be important in the near future, and we know that aid to Ukraine is going to be incredibly important. This is Vice Ranking Member Manning mentioned, the commonality between this is also, a fight against democracy, democratic norms, and the assault on those values that we share. We need to make sure that we continue to outline that for the American public.
I know you said you didn't talk about rules changes and procedures in caucus today, but I'm curious if you have had a discussion as a caucus about raising the threshold for motion to vacate. This is something that there's some disagreement about on the Republican side. Who knows if this comes up for a floor vote, but do you think that members of your caucus would be willing to support those Republicans who want to raise that threshold?
We opposed the Republican rules package on the first opportunity that it was offered. And so we have concerns about the rules that Republicans put in place, including the motion to vacate. Now it is within those rules. If Republicans want to work with us to change those rules, well, first I would submit they could change these rules on their own. They could have a majority vote on the House and change the rules package and change it themselves. My feeling is that they probably don't have the votes for that. Absent that, they can work with us, but they seem to be allergic to want to work with us on governing, and that's unfortunate. Our hope and what I said before still stands. We hope that we find this path forward that could include discussions about this, but that would mean that they have to, include us on these conversations. Next.
I have a comment on legislation that Representative Forbes introduced earlier this year. He calls for it this morning, called the Santos Act, that would amend the FEC Act to require congressional candidates to provide more information about their military service or other aspects of the background and what happened with Representative Santos.
I'll ask Ranking Member Meeks if he wants to comment on it. I don't have any comment on it other than to say that the Democratic caucus supports, increased transparency. But to the Vice Chair's comments, look, George Santos should just resign. And if he had any pride, he would, but I don't think he does. And so, it could potentially be a vote that this body takes or an action that the Department of Justice takes. Either way, he is not fit to serve here. Now, from a transparency and looking forward perspective, if we need to make additional changes, the FEC doesn't always have the best governance structure right now on enforcement either, so that may not be the best path forward, but we're always willing to consider those through the committees of jurisdiction.
I'll just say that the people in his district, Santos's district, are not receiving any services. His constituencies coming to me, asking for services. When we're dealing with these crises, they know not to go to him. So he should resign. But the people in the 4th Congressional District in New York see what is taking place. He should resign. If the Republican Party didn't want to play politics, they would put something forward and vote for it, not something that's a gimmick, knowing they don't have the votes to get rid of them. But I can assure you that we're focused, and either through the body, through the courts, or through the elections, Santos won't be here.
Last question.
Okay. Between Scalise and Jordan, do Democrats see one being a better negotiating partner over the other?
It's up to Republicans to pick their leader. I can tell you that I think some of us have friendly conversations with Steve Scalise occasionally. I think he's viewed as a more affable and member that we can have conversations with. I personally think, from my perspective as a member of the January 6th committee, that Jim Jordan is dangerous to our democracy. I've said that before. His inability to answer questions related to a lawful subpoena poses, I think, institutional concerns. but this is something that Republicans are going to have to worry about. One thing I am confident is that Hakeem Jeffries will have the votes of the Democratic caucus when we are asked to nominate the next speaker. Thank you so much.
Can I say one thing on that, one last thing on that? You know, when we look at what the Republicans are doing with reference to speaker moving over, the world is looking at it. We supposed to be the examples of democracy. And democracy's at stake all over the planet. That's what Ukraine is about. That's what part of what Israel is about. They're standing up with countries, our friends and allies, because of the values that we share. And when you show the dysfunctioning Republican Party, the world is wondering what's happening in the United States. That's why Xi Jinping says that democracy is failing. So I would hope that the Republicans listen and take the lead of Leader Jeffries, and we can show the world, if they would just come and work with us, what democracy is really all about. And we can continue our global leadership to show that democracy can be messy, but it's the best thing that's on this planet.
Thank you.